"Don't mark that reef," the harbor master said. "It marks you." I laughed once and took the folder. I was tired. I had been out 2 weeks already. I wanted to finish the chain and get home. It was a solo job. Small survey boat, 30 feet, shallow draft. I ran soundings, set temporary buoys, made notes. I drew the shoals by hand. Pencil on paper. I liked it simple. It kept me awake. The chain lay quiet, low green humps and black rock teeth. No houses. No other boats some days. The radio stayed quiet except for weather checks and dead air. My barometer rode the bulkhead by the chart table. The needle sat low. I tapped it now and then out of habit. First day out, I worked the south end. The wind stayed light. The water ran flat and clear. I dropped the lead, called depth to myself, marked it. The routine felt clean. I put a yellow Ken buoy on a safe patch and logged the coordinates. The anchor chain scraped a little when I set for lunch. I thought it was just the hook finding a groove. I wiped a salt ring off the chart table, and it came back before I finished my sandwich. I dried the rag, did it again, swore, and moved my cup. Smeared pencil lines from my hands, sweat made a gray haze on the edges. I sharpened and switched to a softer stroke. It still slid. When I pulled into the lee of a point for the night, I heard a bell. One toll. Then quiet. The water lay flat. Not a ripple. There was a bell buoy a mile off on the chart, listed as dead, no bell, no chain. I heard it again. One knock of that bell and nothing else. I told myself it was a pipe or a halyard hitting, but there was no play in the lines. I checked the barometer. The needle tapped at 0 and clicked. It made a faint tick like a nail on glass. It should not have sat there. The sky held stars. The air felt light and dry. I tapped the glass with my nail and watched it shiver and drop again. I wrote it down. Pressure low, no wind. Ears clear. I woke to a hiss and a thump on the hull in the dark. Not waves. A hand flat, then knuckles. I sat up and listened. I held my breath. It came again, low, near the bow. I went on deck with a light. Nothing there. No fish. No weed. The anchor chain stretched straight out and rubbed the roller with a long, slow scrape. It set my teeth on edge. I tossed a second anchor. The noise stopped and then came back, slow and patient. I told the dark to cut it out and went back inside. Next day I ran north. I started fresh lines across the gaps. I made small pencil triangles and wrote depths. My eraser tore the paper once. Salt grit sat on everything. I wiped again. Wet salt found its way into all the seams. The radio gave a burst of static at the top of every hour. No voice behind it. I said my position out loud anyway and waited. Nothing answered. By late afternoon, the compass started to wander. It had been steady all day. Then the card drifted 10 degrees and then 20. I steadied the helm and watched it come back. I let it pass and then it went the other way. The water stayed flat. I put a hand to the steel wheel and felt a weak tremble. I got near the coordinates the fisherman had muttered to me in town. Just a square on my chart where no one had filed anything. Not a reef marked, not a wreck. Blank water. The harbor master's face came back to me and I pushed it aside. I took a sounding line and walked to the bow. The depth went from 80 to 40 in 100 feet. Then 20. No change in the color of the water. The shape of the swell stayed wrong. There was surface chop against wind. The wind came from the east. The chop pushed from the west. It made little saw blades that ran under the hull and died. I set a temporary buoy on a hunk of chain I kept for this. It dropped straight down. The line went slack and then taut and then slack again without any swell to pull it. I frowned and made a note about current. I eased away slow to watch it sit. I looked at the chart to mark the spot and found a pale ghost line under my fresh pencil. It matched my last pass, the one I had erased after the smear. The erased pencil lines on my chart came back like a bruise. I rubbed a finger over them and felt nothing raised. They just sat there, faint and sure. I erased them again and the paper turned fuzzy. This true, I tried a new angle the next morning. I came in from the west, so the sun hit the water clean. My compass spun lazy for a minute, then steadied, then shifted. The radio cracked in my left ear, a hard burst, then died. "Say again," I said. Nothing. In the still air, I saw a thread of light crawl along the rigging. It moved slow, blue-white, like fire without heat. Street. Elmo's fire crawled the rigging from the masthead to the rail. It fizzled and sat on the turnbuckle like a bead. I put my hand an inch off it and felt hairs on my arm lift. I stepped back and looked up. The sky rolled thin white. No storm. The barometer needle tapped at 0 again. Tick, tick, tick. "Not today," I said to no one. I backed off and drifted a while and let the chart sit. I tried to draw. My lines looked wrong. The salt rings bled through the paper, even when I shifted to a dry section. I moved the chart to the berth, and that same ring bloomed under my elbow. I tried to anchor and waited out. I set my best anchor on a short scope and backed down. It bit. 10 minutes later, the line went slack as if someone had cut gravity. Then it jumped and tore at the cleat and the boat swung 90 degrees. No wind, no swell. Just a long pull from under us. The scraping on the roller started again. The long iron-on-iron scrape that made me feel small. I looked over and saw the chain straight down, no angle, and still it scraped. I listened and heard a knock on the hull again. 3 slow hits, low on port. I moved toward it and it moved away. That night I tried to call the cutter that patrolled the area. Static. I did a long count and read my position. The compass sat 2 points off and wandered. I got a faint, old-sounding bell out there. 1 toll. Then a long wait. Then another. Dead calm. The sound found me in the cabin and sat in my chest. I tried to sleep with a pillow over my head. I dreamed of water pushing through gaps and woke with my mouth full of salt. On the 3rd day in that square, I started to feel stupid. I had burned fuel, just fighting nothing. I went back to basics. I ran a grid. I marked each line with a light hand. I numbered the soundings. I taped plastic over the table to keep it dry. It fogged under the sheet anyway and beaded with wet. The salt ring cut through the plastic and hid under it, and then showed up on top again. I threw the plastic in the sink. I told myself I was just tired. I came in at noon and put another temporary buoy 100 yards off the first. I wanted a range. I tied the line, checked the shackle, watched my hands. The hairs on my fingers stood up. I did not feel any wind. My ears popped like I went down in a dive. Pressure dropped so fast I bent double. My vision went gray at the edges. The radio spat a long, ugly growl and cut off. The barometer needle sat pinned and tapped. Fast now. Tap, 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 tap. I swallowed and yawned and could not clear it. My engine note changed even though the throttle sat still. I looked up. The sky went flat and pale. A wall of air and mist stood up on the horizon to the north. It did not march. It appeared. No time to reef, but there was no sail up. I reached for the helm and the first slap hit. Not rain. Air. It shoved the stern. The boat went hard over. The model felt wrong. A white glow slid down the mast and pooled on the spreaders and a rim. Lightning rimmed the mast without a strike. Street! Elmo's fire bloomed and crawled and raced across the shrouds. It lit my hands as I grabbed the rail. Every piece of metal hummed. The anchor chain went tight and sang and then ripped out of the bow roller and snapped back. I heard the bell again. Not far. One toll, then nothing. The wind hit full then. It came from all sides. A wall. It pinned me against the console and shoved me down. The pressure made my chest small. I could not pull air. The boat heeled and skated sideways. The water under us stood up in slabs. No swell lines. Just planes. The compass card spun and stopped and spun. The surface chop went against the push of the wind and made a crosshatch that hissed. I saw the water go pale ahead. Teeth under it. I had felt them on the lead. The wall of wind shoved us onto it. The hull lifted and then slammed. The sound came up through my feet. Sharp and mean. I moved without thinking. I grabbed the knife from the rail and went forward on my knees. The fire on the shrouds followed and ran ahead of me at the same speed. I did not think about why. I only held on and crawled. The anchor chain scraped and sang and then went slack and then bit again as if someone hauled and then let go. A line snapped past my ear and took a curl of skin. I put my hand on the stem head and it vibrated hard. The temporary buoy off the bow jerked and danced. The line went from my cleat straight down, then forward, then aft, as if a hand moved under us. I cut once, and the line held with one strand. I cut again, and it sprang loose and whipped my arm. The buoy shot to the surface and rolled away, and then it was gone. Not dragged under. Just gone in the blur of white water and glare. The boat lifted and slid along the edge of the reef. I felt the keel kiss rock and jump. The mast sprayed sparks. The blue light licked my face and tasted metal. I let go of the idea of marking anything. I left the square on the chart alone. No note. No symbol. I shoved the pencil off the table and let it clatter. I backed the throttle and pointed the bow where the pressure let me. The wind pushed from behind for a second. I took it and went. We cleared the last pale bit and fell into deeper water. The push eased. The hum stopped. The glow on the rig flickered and went thin. The barometer needle clicked once and came off the peg. My ears popped out and the world sounded big. Behind me, the wall of wind stood for a minute and then slid back into the pale and was not there. No line on the water. No cloud. Just a flat sea and a smell of iron and hot rain that never fell. I drifted with the engine at idle and put both hands on the wheel and tried not to shake. A gull crossed and cried and then shut up. I pulled the hatch and went to the chart. The top sheet had a wet thumbprint where my hand had been before the hit. The faint lines I had erased were back again. Not fresh. Old. They lay across the square I had tried to fill. They made a frame. A blank in the middle of it. I stared at it and thought of the harbor master. I said, "Okay." I turned the boat for the gap south. I did not look back at the pale water. I set no more temporary buoys. I took the others up on the way out. The anchor chain had fresh bright bites on the links where it had ground. The bow roller had a groove. My knife had a notch. I went back to the base and filed what I had. I left the square empty. I drew a clean box and shaded the edges and wrote nothing inside. The manager scowled and asked why. I said the bottom was not stable and left it. He told me to go out again when the weather cleared. I said yes and did not go. I took a different run to the east and set markers for a channel no one used. Night came and the radio hissed, and I heard the bell once out across dead water. I listened and let it pass. After that I kept one blank on every chart. A clean space. No depth marks. No notes. Sometimes the blank sat where I had found nothing but sand. Sometimes it sat near a reef that already had 3 buoys. It did not matter. It was for me. When I slept on the boat on still nights, I heard the bell once. Not always. But when it came clean, not dragged by wind or swell, and I said okay again. I kept a knife by the bow, and I cut free anything that wanted to tie me to a place that pressed on my ears. The harbor master saw me once at the pier and did not smile. He looked at the copy of the chart I had rolled under my arm. He did not ask. He just nodded and walked away. I went back to the boat and ran a thumb over the groove on the roller and thought about the glow on the rig. I stayed out. I did the work. I slept in short bursts. I kept my voice low on the radio. I wiped salt that would not stay gone. The salt rings reappeared on the table, even with no cup there. The erased pencil lines came back where I did not want them. The compass wandered now and then held. The barometer lived low. On quiet days it tapped once, as if to remind me. Tap. I put the chart down and drew around the blank and left it clean. I hope you enjoyed that one. Sometimes these stories stay with you longer than you expect. If you'd like to hear more, subscribe for the next night's story. Like the video if you enjoyed it, and maybe watch another before the lights go out. See you in the next one.